G'day guys, Max here from Evidence-Based Football Manager. This is part 2 of my Wonder Kid research series. Today we're going to talk about more markers that you can use to predict the future growth of youngsters in Football Manager so that you can buy the right Wonder Kids for your club and not waste your precious transfer budget on young players who won't grow as much as you anticipated. A quick recap on how I did my research for this video. So in FM22, I made a short list of 726 new gens who are 15-year-old in the year 2022. I simulated the game 15 years into the future so that I could track the growth of those 726 players. I recorded the attributes of those new gens every 2 years in the game, and I exported that data into an Excel spreadsheet. This way, I'm able to compare the attributes of these new gens at the age of 15 with those at the age of 28 when these players all reach their peaks as a player. First, we'll have a look at determination, which is one of the mental attributes of players in Football Manager. According to the in-game description, determination is about a player's commitment to succeed and do his very best on and off the pitch. So it does sound like determination has something to do with a player's growth. So let's see if the results of my research agrees with that. So I'm going to show you these two graphs. This one on the left is comparing the player's determination at the age of 15 with their CA rating when they are 28. This graph here on the right hand side is comparing the determination at the age of 19 with the player's CA rating at the age of 28. The reason I have two graphs is because determination, just like any other attributes in Football Manager, can grow a little bit with age. So I wanted to make two separate graphs using determination from age 15 and 19. So you can see there is a very weak positive correlation between determination and peak CA in both of these graphs. If you have a look at this graph here, I think you can sort of think of it as three separate sections. So when determination is below 8, the peak CA of that player will most likely not exceed 100, which means the player is probably not going to be good enough for most top clubs in the world. When determination is between 8 to 18, it's very random, so you can't make any predictions about a player's peak CA when the determination is between 8 to 18. However, when determination is extremely high, like 18 or above, peak CA will almost always rise above 100 by the age of 28. It's still not a guarantee that the player is going to be a world beater, but at least you can be quite confident that the CA will exceed 100 by the age of 28. Remember, to me, a world-class player is a player with a CA rating of above 160 in Football Manager. Next, let's have a look at professionalism and ambition, which are two of the hidden attributes in Football Manager. So I have four graphs here. So this first one shows the relationship between professionalism at the age of 15 and the player's CA at the age of 28. This one is comparing professionalism at the age of 19 and a CA rating at 28. This graph here is the relationship between ambition at the age of 15 and the player's CA rating at the age of 28. And this one is showing the relationship between ambition at the age of 19 and CA at the age of 28. Again, I have two sets of graphs here using the data from age 15 and 19 because hidden attributes like professionalism and ambition can change over time as players age, just like the normal attributes. So similar to determination, there is a weak positive correlation between professionalism and peak CA and also between ambition and peak CA. The pattern is more or less similar between these four graphs, and they are also very similar to the graphs for determination, which we looked at just now. So when professionalism or ambition are below 8, the CA rating at the age of 28 is most likely to stay below 100. When professionalism or ambition are between 8 to 18, it's very random. But when professionalism or ambition is above 18 in this range, a player is more likely to be successful in the future compared to these guys over here. even if professionalism or ambition are above 18, it still doesn't guarantee that the player is going to be a superstar, but at least the chances are higher in this range here. Of course, you do need to use the in-game editor to view the professionalism and ambition of players, but there is a way to guess these attributes without using the editor. First is by looking at the personality of the players. So players with high professionalism or ambition have a high chance of having personalities such as professional, ambitious, model citizen, model professional, or perfectionist. So look out for these types of personalities when you're going shopping for wonderkids in your save. The second way to guesstimate the hidden attributes of a player in Football Manager is by reading the scout reports. So, for example, I have a new gen youngster here, Freddie de Backer, and this guy has 18 professionalism. And if you go into his scout report here, it says right here, professional individual. Also, if you have a look at this guy here, so his name is Foster Sailisi. So he has 19 ambition, and if I go into his scout report, it says here he shows a fairly ambitious nature. So while these scout reports don't tell you the exact values of these hidden attributes like professionalism or ambition, they can at least give you some rough hints about it. Next, let's talk about injury proneness. So injury proneness is another hidden attribute in Football Manager that determines how likely players are to get injured in the game. Just like any other attributes in Football Manager, it's a score out of 20, and injury proneness can change over time. So I have two graphs here. So the x-axis here represents injury proneness at the age of 15, and the y-axis represents the player's CA at the age of 28. Here, the x-axis is the injury proneness at the age of 19, and the y-axis is CA at the age of 28. So you can see when injury proneness is between 0 to 14, there's no correlation between the x and the y-axes. But when injury proneness is 14 or above, you can see all these dots, they're staying below the level of CA 120, which means all these players, they are struggling to develop due to their injuries. In my previous video, I showed you an example of a player struggling to develop because of injuries. So I'll bring it up again. So this guy here, his name is Lucas Leckmann. He's a new gen from Dortmund. So when Leckmann was 17, he had a CA rating of 117, which is very, very good for a 17-year-old. However, Leckmann unfortunately has an injury proneness of 15 out of 20, which is a bad sign for his future growth. So when Leckmann is 28 years old, you can see from his injury history that he's had so many injuries throughout his career. So if I check his hidden attributes again, his injury proneness has gone up to 20 out of 20, and his CA rating has fallen all the way down to 89. So you can see from this unfortunate case of Lucas Leckmann that a high injury proneness rating can severely restrict a player's growth in Football Manager. Next, we're going to talk about reputation. Reputation is another hidden attribute for players in Football Manager, and it grows steadily over time as players age. So I have two graphs here to show the relationship between a player's reputation at a young age and the player's peak CA at the age of 28. So this graph on the left is using the reputation of a player when he is 15, and this graph is using the player's reputation when he is 19. So you can see there is a pretty strong positive correlation between reputation and future CA, which means that in Football Manager, if you're a popular player as a youngster, you are more likely to succeed as a footballer in the future. Unfortunately, it is a little bit tricky to guess a player's reputation in Football Manager without using the editor. The best way to estimate a player's reputation in the game is by going into the player's information page and having a look at the player's reputation star rating. So at the age of 15, players with the highest reputation tend to have around a half star rating. At the age of 17, players with the highest reputation tend to have around 1.5 stars. And at the age of 19, the most reputable players tend to have around 2 stars. So I guess that's a rough benchmark that you can use when you're looking for future wonderkids in Football Manager. Another way to guess a player's reputation in the game is by reading the player's biography. So, young players with a high reputation in the game will have a biography that says something like well known name for football fans across Europe, or player with a growing reputation among football fans in Italy. Now, the wording of the biography doesn't correlate exactly with the player's reputation value, so do consider the biography as a rough guide only. Also, new gens that have just been generated by the game, kids who are 15 or 16 years old, will not have a biography yet in the game, so do remember that as well. Okay, next I'm going to discuss the transfer values of young players. So I have four graphs here. In this graph here, the x-axis represents the minimum transfer values of players at the age of 15, and the y-axis represents the player's CA at the age of 28. In this graph, the x-axis is the maximum transfer value of a player at 15, and the y-axis is the player's CA at 28. Remember, in Football Manager 22, transfer values are split into minimum and maximum values. So I had to make separate graphs for minimum and maximum transfer values. These two graphs here, they're using the minimum and maximum transfer values of players when they are 19 years of age. The units for these graphs are millions of pounds. So for example, for this guy here, his name is John Yves Bertrand. And when he was 15 years old, his transfer value was between 14 to 42 million pounds, which is pretty high for a 15-year-old kid. And when he is 28, he reaches a CA of 139. So you can see that there is a weak positive correlation in all of these graphs. Let's have a closer look at the maximum transfer values, because when you purchase a player in Football Manager 22, you almost always have to pay something that's close to their maximum transfer values rather than their minimum transfer values. So if you paid 20 million pounds or more for a 15 or a 19-year-old youngster, it's pretty much guaranteed that the player will eventually reach a CA rating of a 140 or above. Of course, you can try to pay more than 20 million pounds for a youngster in order to increase your chances of buying a future superstar. But I wouldn't really advise it, because disappointments can still happen. For example, if you have a look at this guy here, his name is Jacob Jensen. So at the age of 19, his transfer value is between 24 to 73 million pounds, which is really high for a 19-year-old kid. And his CA at the age of 19 is 122, which is also very high for a 19-year-old. So no wonder that this kid is priced so highly as a teenager. However, if I fast forward to the year 2035, when Jacob Jensen is 28, you can see his transfer value has plummeted to between 2.8 to 8.4 million pounds. And if I check his hidden attributes, his CA is 131, which means this guy's CA grew by a meager 9 points in 9 years, which is obviously a very poor effort on his part. So as you can see, a player's transfer value as a teenager can be a rough guide to his future growth, but disappointments can happen, so do avoid investing too much money into a single player. Okay, the last factor I wanted to talk about in this video is the wage of young players. Does the wage of youngsters have any value in predicting the player's growth in the future? Let's find out. So I have three graphs here. So this one is comparing a player's wage at 15 years of age with his CA at the age of 28. This graph here is comparing a player's wage at the age of 17 with his CA at the age of 28. And this one is comparing the player's wage at 19 with his CA at 28. The units for all these graphs are £1,000 per week. So if you have a look at this graph here, you can see that the vast majority of youngsters are paid less than £1,000 per week. This is because most of these players, at the age of 15, they're on youth contracts. So, they're going to be paid like very little. And you can see there isn't any correlative relationship between the wage and the future CA of these players. However, in these two graphs, there is a weak positive correlation between the player's wage and the future CA, which means that Generally speaking, if a player is being paid more as a youngster, the chances are higher that he will go on to become a successful footballer in the future. It's just a general rule. So, as you can see, there is still a handful of players who aren't being paid too much wages as a youngster, but they still go on to become quite successful in the future, and vice versa. So sometimes a player may be being paid a lot of wages as a teenager, but they don't become too successful by the age of 28. So here is the summary of everything that I talked about in the two Wonder Kid videos. So when you go shopping for a Wonder Kid in Football Manager 22, look for these markers. 1. In terms of CA, at the age of 15, CA should be at least 80, which is 1 or more star rating. At the age of 17, CA should be at least 100, which is 1.5 or more star rating. And at the age of 19, CA should be at least 120, which is 2 or more star rating. 2. In terms of determination, avoid youngsters with determination below 8. 3. In terms of personality, look for personalities such as model citizen, perfectionist, or any personality that contains the word professional or ambitious, as these personalities mean that the player has a high professionalism or ambition. 4. Avoid youngsters who have a long injury history. 5. In terms of reputation, have a look at the player's biography and look for hints that the player has a high reputation among his peers. 6. In terms of transfer values, generally speaking, a youngster who is highly valued in your safe is more likely to become more successful in the future. Disappointments can still happen, so try not to invest too much money into a single player. 7. In terms of wage, again, generally speaking, a player who is highly paid as a youngster has a higher chance of becoming more successful in the future, although exceptions can happen. Do keep in mind that none of these rules are fail-safe, so do exercise discretion for every individual transfer that you make for your club in your save. Let's have a look at a live example, shall we? So, I have this guy here, Mr. Jude Bellingham, who is an 18-year-old youngster playing for Dortmund. I've never heard of this guy, but he looks quite promising, so let's have a closer look at him. So, criteria number 1, scout rating. So he's rated 2.5 stars by my scout, which fits my recommendation that a Wonder Kid should be at least 2 stars by the age of 19. Bellingham is 18 and he's already 2.5 stars, so he's good in that regard. Criteria number 2, determination is 18, which is very high, so that's a tick. Criteria number 3, personality is professional, which is one of the desirable personalities that I talked about, so that's a tick there. Criteria number 4, injury history. So let's have a look at Bellingham's injury history. So he's had one moderate injury on his record, which is fine. Criteria number 5, reputation. Okay, let's have a look at his biography. A well-known name for football players across Europe. That sounds pretty good for an 18-year-old, so that's a pass. Criteria number 6, transfer value. He's valued anywhere between 94 to 119 million pounds, which is super high for an 18-year-old. So yep, that's definitely a tick. And finally, criteria number 7, wage is 48.5k pounds per week, which again is very high for an 18-year-old. So that's a pass as well with flying colours. So this player, Mr. Jude Bellingham, is a youngster in Football Manager 22 who ticks all of my 7 criteria for a Wonder Kid. So I have a pretty good feeling that he is going to develop into one of the top players in Football Manager 22. Okay, that is it for this Wonder Kid research series. Do you agree with what I talked about today? What do you think of Wonder Kids in Football Manager? Comment below to let me know. As always, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.